Hello and welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Handan in Seoul. The threat of a wider war in the Middle East is growing as tensions mount on Israel's northern border. The conflict between Israel and Iran-backed Lebanese militant group Hezbollah have ratcheted up yet again in recent weeks, with the Israeli forces approving a plan for an offensive to push Hezbollah further back from the border, and Hezbollah allegedly using Beirut airport to store Iranian arms. As the world closely watches developments with concerns, UN Chief Antonio Guterres has warned that we must not turn Lebanon into another Gaza, and that a single miscalculation or reckless move could plunge the region into a catastrophic war. Are Israel and Hezbollah on the brink of a full-scale war, and what could the consequences be for the Middle East and beyond? For some insights, we have Aidan Hayher, reader in international relations at the University of Westminster, joining us from London. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Also with us tonight is Paek Sung-hoon, researcher at the Institute of Middle East Studies. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, Professor Paek, I want to start with you. So fears are growing over a full-blown war between Israel and Hezbollah after both sides claim to be ready to go to war following an intensification of their cross-border attacks. First, give us an update on the current situation, and for our viewers who may not have been up to date on the issue, why are the Israel-Hezbollah tensions flaring up now?
I think it could be explained in two aspects. As Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had said, the intense phase of fighting in Rafah in southern Gaza is nearly over. He wanted to dismantle the next imminent threat, which is Hezbollah in up north. And after the tragic passing of Iranian President Raisi, Hezbollah has become main adversary of fighting against Israel with the new flying projectiles that are allegedly provided by ILGC. And of course, it is not an easy task to dismantle the Hezbollah, but at least Israel government want to capture higher ground in the negotiation of post-Israel-Hamas warfare. And second aspect is that ever since the war has begun, apart from a direct family members of Israel casualty, and of course Gazan Palestinians, residents of northern Israel were also the primary victims of wars. They have been exposed to Iranian-backed Hezbollah missile attack. Because of that, Netanyahu was and is under intense pressure from opposition and members of his coalition to take action in north, where more than 60,000 of them have been living in the temporary accommodation. So a poll which was conducted by Jewish People Policy Institute found that more than 60% Israeli wants to attack Hezbollah with full force. And Netanyahu is using this to prolong Israel-Hamas war, which need more time for him to settle the dispute in the Knesset and in and out and in international politics. So we could just talk these two aspects: why the tension is growing and why these Hamas and Israel tensions are kind of like, getting into a spiral into a bigger conflict.
Well, Lebanon and Israel have officially been in a state of war for decades, so tensions along the border are nothing new, but a series of events following the Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, including several deaths of Hezbollah's senior commanders, also seem to have fueled their conflict. And as you highlighted, Netanyahu sees Hezbollah as the next imminent threat. Now, Professor Hayher, how do you see the chances of Israel and Hezbollah going into a full-scale war? Some say the chances remain low, as it would be catastrophic for both sides.
Yes, well, as was stated there has been significant hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel since the October the 8th attacks. 60,000 Israelis have been evacuated from their homes in the north of Israel. And on the Lebanese side, more than 90,000 people have been evacuated. So the situation is already one of hostilities. But you could say that neither side would benefit from a war. Clearly, from a humanitarian point of view, from the point of view of the cost of a war, it would be something that both sides would like to avoid. However, there are some in Israel who would potentially like to see a broader war, and unfortunately those voices are becoming louder. A war against Hezbollah would be an advantage to the Israelis in some respects, as it would be able to present this conflict as being about more than just Gaza, as being a war for the very survival of Israel, about Israel fighting against terrorism throughout the Middle East. It would certainly spin it in that way. And, you know, it is worth remembering that this government is very unpopular in Israel, and it's a government that has, you know, demonstrated a willingness to engage in the most egregious violence against the Palestinian people, and would likely think of expanding the war in purely strategic terms, wouldn't see it from the point of view of a humanitarian catastrophe, and would like to, you know, fold the Palestinian conflict into a broader war, which would hopefully, from their point of view, bring the United States more directly involved in the conflict. So essentially they want to broaden the war purely for their own interests.
So Israel wants to broaden the war, perhaps also drawing in the U.S. for purely their own strategic interests. Hezbollah, fully backed by Iran, is considered a much stronger force than the Hamas militants, which is all the more concerning. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant headed to Washington to hold talks with top U.S. officials, so hopefully a diplomatic solution will come out of his trip. But in the meantime, Professor Peck, U.S. officials have voiced concerns that Hezbollah could overwhelm Israel's air defenses in the north, including the Iron Dome air defense system. How do you assess Hezbollah's attack capabilities?
Many of think tanks in US and UK, such as CSIS, IISS, has concluded that the Hezbollah have a capabilities to launch up to 3,000 missiles a day, a rate that could be sustained for up to 3 weeks. And if the timing and the location is well planned, it could dismantle the missile defense system of Israel, including the Iron Dome, as that had happened in October 7, 2003, when the Hamas executed their surprise attack. But if we assume in a full-scale warfare, we have witnessed 99% of Iranian missile attack on Israel was intercepted. So we need to be more cautious with our analysis on the capability of Hezbollah. But yes, we shouldn't be like giving too much securitization on backing Israeli going intervening in southern Lebanon and going to attack on going on a military operation on southern Lebanon. So we should. We have to be more cautious of like these kind of analyzation because in the context they are putting their own proposal of making this analyzation.
Hezbollah, with an army of more than 100,000 dedicated fighters equipped with thousands of missiles, rockets, and armed drones that can hit targets deep inside Israel, is indeed quite threatening. Those are what we're hearing these days. But we do need to be a bit more cautious when making assessments on their attack capabilities. Now, Professor Hayher, what would constitute a red line for Israel and Hezbollah? In other words, what are the potential triggers for Israel and Hezbollah that could escalate into a full-scale conflict?
I think from Hezbollah's point of view, if Israel was to send troops into Lebanon, that would be considered a red line. I think likewise, if there was further attacks by Israel against Iran or Syria, that would also be considered a significant escalation that Hezbollah would feel compelled to respond to. So those would be, I think, the conditions that would lead to Hezbollah becoming much more directly involved in it. From Israel's point of view, I would imagine that if there was significantly more missile attacks on major cities, if, let's say, Israeli soldiers were taken captive, if there was a bomb that killed a significant number of civilians, let's say if Hezbollah launched an attack and it blew up a school or a hospital or something like that, then again, that would be considered from Israel's point of view a red line. But it is worth remembering that there is significant anger across the Middle East at the moment, and the general public in many Middle Eastern states would like to see, I think, their own governments taking a much stronger, harder line with Israel. So if Israel was to escalate the attacks and to become more directly involved on the ground in Syria and Lebanon, then that would really, I think, enable that groundswell of anger to explode, essentially, and could force certain states to take action. And, it's worth remembering that there is this axis of resistance involving Iran and Syria and Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis that have, said many, many times that they want us to see essentially the destruction of Israel. And if that was triggered, if that axis was triggered more directly by an Israeli attack, then it could lead to a full-scale conflict very, very quickly.
Dr. Beck, the U.S. and the international community are making concerted efforts to prevent Israel and Hezbollah from descending into an all-out war. But if another devastating war breaks out, how do you foresee the possible impact on the Middle East and the broader global stage?
Global stage. To be honest, right now, there is not, even if there's a full-scale war happens in Israel and Israel and Hezbollah, I don't think there will be a big shift in the Middle Eastern politics. Because as we could see, if we compare to that of Israel-Arab conflict of past conflict, the Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia and any other Gulf state, there's no incentives for them to engage in and bring a bigger war. And even Biden administration now are offering a deal that Saudi Arabia cannot resist, because they are kind of giving a what do we call the security guarantee, the treaties to the Saudi Arabia to join in the normalization with Israel. So, but the only one concern is Iran. If Iran sees this Hamas, Hezbollah, and Israel start a full-scale warfare, which will lead to the collapse of Hezbollah, then there's a possibility that Iran will gonna fully engage. But it will be the full-scale war between U.S. alliances with the resistance of axis of resistance, so-called Shiite Crescent. But the possibility is highly unlikely, because having said it that in the beginning, that the passing of Raisi and Iran needs to do the presidential election, and they have to focus on stabilizing their domestic politics. So they don't have that incentives to go on a war with Israel if Israel doesn't cross the red line that they were going to eliminate the Hezbollah within Lebanon. But even for the Israel, it is almost impossible task for them to do it. So this two warfare, if the warfare between Israel and Hezbollah are kind of limited in the southern Lebanon, and it won't be a final blow to the Hezbollah, then the impact of this Israel and Hezbollah warfare won't be that big.
So the key question here is whether it will bring about a total disruption, total collapse of Hezbollah, which would then draw in Iran and also the U.S. Whether those two, Iran and the U.S., will be drawn into the war will be the key question here. But for now, that seems unlikely in your view. Professor Hayher, meanwhile, reports indicate that Israel is close to achieving its goals in Rafah, and that months of its major military operations might soon give way to a new, less intense phase of the conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said the intense phase of fighting in Rafah is nearly over. Is the war in Gaza finally nearing an end?
Well, I think I've been on your program a number of times, and I've made the same point regarding this. I think it's wrong to characterize it as a war. This is a state attacking a civilian population. Obviously, there is Hamas involved in this, but this isn't an operation to deal with Hamas. This is an operation to eliminate the Palestinian people from the Gaza Strip. Now, the idea that you can win a conflict like that by destroying an entire population is not just immoral and illegal, it's also strategically a massive mistake. You know, even recently, the Israeli senior military official Daniel Hagari said that you can't make Hamas disappear. You know, they will simply come again. This genocide that Israel is waging against people, the Palestinian people, has created so much anger amongst the Palestinians, amongst people of the Arab world, that this is, you know, just going to ensure that the conflict will last for decades. You know, people will naturally be inclined to take up arms against Israel for many, many years to come. And Israel has demonstrated utter contempt for the Palestinian people. And this is going to have a very lasting legacy. The scale of the destruction, the scale of the violence that the Israelis have committed against the Palestinian people really is extraordinary. You know, nearly 40,000 Palestinians have been killed, nearly 8,000 children have been killed, 1.7 million people displaced. You know, the UN report recently said that they found evidence of war crimes, crimes against humanity, violations of international humanitarian law, and extermination. So these are, you know, objective observers from the UN using the most emotive, damning language to describe Israel's actions. And in that context, this is something that will resonate with the ordinary Palestinians, with the ordinary people throughout the Arab world, with people throughout the world more generally, who are repulsed by Israel's actions. And the idea that they can win this conflict by destroying an entire people is utterly, utterly stupid in the extreme, as well as being immoral. This is a conflict that now Israel has, because of the way Israel has waged it in this phase, is destined to scar the Middle East for many decades to come.
Professor Peck, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dissolved the war cabinet after the resignation of two centrist politicians. What do we need to know about the dissolution, and how would it affect future ceasefire efforts?
Netanyahu, the war cabinet will be replaced by, according to Netanyahu, the war cabinet will be replaced by a scaled down so-called kitchen cabinet, where sensitive discussion and the consultation will take place. But the problem is there won't be a bigger change in near futures, because right now the National Security Minister of Itamar Ben-Gvir and the Finance Minister of Bezalel Smotrich are trying to come into a war cabinet, which they are the ultra hardcore, like right wing. So, and still now the Likud party, the coalition parties, are holding a majority vote in Knesset. So there's not, even though the war cabinet has been dissolved, but there is not many incentives for current leadership to change their direction to more the negotiable, like the body. And but the future, what I have to say is this. I mean, the main problem here for Israel is that they could not find their partner for to do the ceasefire deal with Gaza. I mean, they don't believe Hamas, and there's no entity that could substitute the Hamas. It's not whether Hamas is good or bad, but it is because Israel has been isolating the Gaza for starting from 2006, causing there's no entity that could replace the Hamas. So like they said, Israel government are kind of insisting that there will be a civilian body or structure that will gonna rule the govern the Gaza Strip, but there's no any entity who could do that. So that's why it's causing Israel to move on next phase. So whether the new members comes in or the more moderate members come into the war cabinet will not going to change much in the situation if they don't decide it whether they're going to who they're going to decide for the entity to make the reconstruction process of Gaza. If that is not settled, then whether which leadership comes in with a different party or leadership, it won't change that much in terms of like Gaza and Israel conflict and ceasefire deal.
And our last questions for you, Dr. Hayher. The U.S. is working to prevent a greater war between Israel and Hezbollah while assuring Israel that the Biden administration is fully prepared to back its ally. Now, with the U.S. presidential election now just about 5 months away, what would be the Biden administration's key priorities in the Middle East?
Well, the United States is part of the problem in this situation. It's not necessarily the solution. The U.S. could have ended the slaughter of the Palestinians months ago. It's U.S. support for Israel that has enabled Israel to carry out this genocidal campaign. And as you mentioned, the elections are, one of the reasons why the Biden administration has taken this particular stance towards Israel in the context of what it's doing in Palestine, and obviously the Israeli lobby in the United States is very strong. But it is trying to do something that really is untenable. It has an interest in maintaining a strong Israel. It doesn't want to get involved in a regional war. So it's trying to support Israel and also at the same time not annoy Arab states, which, as I say, is largely an untenable position. It's quite possible that you can, continue to placate the governments of various different Arab states, but it's the people on the ground, I think, that need to be factored into these situations. If you think back to the Arab Spring in 2011, prior to the Arab Spring, people assumed that the governments in the Arab world were so strong that it would never be overthrown. They were able to maintain order domestically. And the Arab Spring demonstrated that the people on the ground were capable of taking action and changing the policies of the government and changing the government in certain instances. And I would suspect that the same thing is happening here. The current governments in the Arab world are trying to restrain their populations who are naturally livid at what is happening in Palestine. And Biden is hoping that these governments will do a deal with him, will not become more directly involved in what's happening in Palestine, that it'll only be Hezbollah or the Houthis or Hamas that get directly involved. But I can't see that as something that can last for much longer. And as I said before, and I think it is really worth reiterating, this conflict, the way in which it has been waged, the way Israel has behaved, will leave a lasting legacy that can't be just overlooked, that can't be brushed aside by any short-term deal that happens in the next month or 2 months or 6 months or even the next year. This is something that will, has enraged the younger population throughout the region, obviously in Palestine, and that will come back to haunt not just Israel, but the United States and the West more generally for their complicity in supporting Israel in what has been one of the most horrific campaigns ever waged.
It will have lasting ramifications for generations to come, perhaps. Thank you so much, Professor Hayher, for sharing your insights with us tonight. And many thanks to you as well, Professor Beck, for your brilliant analysis.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.